The billionaire never even looked at the report before throwing it into the trash. He was standing at the head of a $30 million conference table, surrounded by executives in tailored suits, when a thin, handwritten folder landed in front of him. The cover was worn. The corners were bent. There was even a faint coffee stain across the top. The billionaire picked it up between two fingers, as if it were something dirty. Then he glanced at the janitor standing nervously near the door, crumpled the report in his fist, and dropped it into the wastebasket. What happened less than an hour later would leave every member of that board speechless. Before we continue, if you believe kindness deserves a second chance and that someone's position in life does not determine their worth, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. You never know when a simple story might remind someone that their voice still matters. The janitor's name was Nathan Carter, a 43-year-old single father who had spent nearly 6 years cleaning the marble floors of Halston Meridian Group, one of the largest private investment companies in Chicago, Illinois. Nathan never imagined himself working inside a building where people wore watches worth more than his car. He had once dreamed of becoming an engineer, but life had a way of rearranging dreams when you least expected it. After his wife died unexpectedly from an illness, Nathan became the only parent to his 12-year-old daughter, Grace. He needed stable work, health insurance, and enough money to keep a roof over their heads, so he accepted the janitorial position without complaint. Every morning, Nathan arrived before sunrise. He cleaned the executive floors while the city outside was still dark, polished conference room tables until they reflected the ceiling lights, emptied wastebaskets, replaced supplies, and quietly repaired whatever small things people broke. Most executives never knew his name. To them, he was simply the man who made their messes disappear. But Nathan noticed everything. He noticed which elevators malfunctioned. He noticed which conference rooms always ran too hot. He noticed when employees complained about unusual smells near the electrical closets. He noticed when a ceiling tile began to sag above the executive lounge. Most importantly, he noticed numbers. Nathan had always been good with numbers. His late father had been an accountant, and when Nathan was young, he had spent countless evenings watching his father work through spreadsheets at the kitchen table. Nathan never received a college degree, but he had taught himself basic accounting, statistics, and financial analysis through library books and free online courses whenever he had the time. He didn't tell anyone. People often made assumptions about janitors, and Nathan had learned that sometimes the safest way to survive was to let people underestimate you. Then, 3 weeks before the board meeting, Nathan noticed something strange. The company's cleaning supply orders had increased by nearly 40%, even though the number of employees had remained almost exactly the same. At first, he assumed it was an ordinary mistake. But while replacing supplies in the executive storage room, he accidentally saw several invoices on a printer tray. The invoices were being paid to a maintenance company called Northbridge Facility Solutions. Nathan recognized the name. It was the same company responsible for several repairs around the building. Something didn't feel right. Over the next several nights, after his daughter went to sleep, Nathan began comparing discarded copies of invoices with publicly available corporate records. He used his old laptop at the kitchen table while Grace slept in the next room. The more he investigated, the stranger things became. Northbridge Facility Solutions appeared to be receiving payments far above market rates. Some services had been billed multiple times. Several repairs listed on invoices had never happened. One invoice claimed that the company had replaced an entire section of the building's ventilation system. Nathan knew that was impossible. He had cleaned that mechanical room himself. The old equipment was still there. Nathan spent 9 nights checking everything. Eventually, he discovered something much bigger. Millions of dollars were disappearing through a network of shell companies connected to someone inside Halston Meridian Group. Nathan knew he could lose his job if he accused the wrong person. He also knew he was only a janitor. Nobody important would believe him. Still, he created a detailed report. He documented dates, invoices, company registrations, payment amounts, duplicate charges, and photographs of equipment that supposedly had been replaced. At the very end, he wrote one sentence. "I may not have the title to investigate this, but I believe someone should." Nathan printed the report and carried it to the executive floor. That was how he ended up standing inside the boardroom. At the head of the table sat Richard Halston, the company's 60-year-old billionaire founder and CEO. Richard had built the company from a small investment office into a financial empire worth billions. His reputation was legendary. He was brilliant, intimidating, impatient, and famously intolerant of mistakes. Nathan stood quietly while the executives discussed quarterly performance. Finally, He stepped forward and handed the folder to Richard's assistant. When Richard saw the janitor approaching, his expression immediately hardened. Nathan explained that he had found irregularities in the company's maintenance expenses and believed the board should review them. Richard opened the folder. He scanned the first page, then the second. His face showed almost no emotion. Without asking Nathan a single question, Richard crumpled the report. He threw it into the trash. The room became uncomfortable. Nathan stood frozen. Richard told him that people were hired to clean floors, not audit billion-dollar companies. He warned Nathan not to waste executive time again. Nathan looked toward the trash can. For a second, his eyes filled with humiliation. But he didn't argue. He simply nodded, thanked them for their time, and walked out. Nobody in that room knew that Nathan had already made one copy of the report, and that copy was sitting safely at home. That evening, Nathan arrived home later than usual. Grace was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. She immediately noticed her father's expression. Nathan didn't tell her everything. He didn't want his daughter worrying about whether they would still have a home next month. Instead, he smiled, heated the leftover soup, and helped her with a math problem. After Grace went to bed, Nathan opened his laptop. He had received an anonymous email. There was no message, only one attachment. It was a spreadsheet containing internal payment records. Nathan stared at the screen. The numbers confirmed everything he had suspected. But there was something else. One of the shell companies receiving money was connected to a senior member of Halston Meridian Group's board. Nathan realized the problem wasn't a mistake. Someone was stealing from the company, and someone powerful was helping them. The next morning, Nathan returned to work as usual. He cleaned the lobby. He emptied trash cans. He polished the elevators. But at 9:17 a.m., everything changed. The building's security director rushed through the lobby. 5 minutes later, several black SUVs pulled up outside. Members of the board entered the building. Richard Halston was among them. Nathan watched from behind the reception desk as executives hurried toward the private elevators. Then the company's chief financial officer, Martin Cole, walked past Nathan. Martin suddenly stopped. Their eyes met. For one brief second, Nathan saw fear in the man's face. Not anger, not confusion. Fear. Nathan knew immediately that Martin had recognized his report. By noon, an emergency board meeting had been called. Nathan wasn't invited, but someone else had been. A forensic accounting firm had arrived, and they had discovered the same irregularities Nathan had documented. The boardroom doors closed. For nearly 2 hours, executives argued behind them. Then the doors opened. Richard Halston walked out looking completely different. The arrogance was gone from his face. He walked directly toward Nathan. Several board members followed him. Nathan stood silently, unsure what was happening. Richard asked Nathan where he had learned to analyze financial records. Nathan explained that his father had been an accountant and that he had spent years studying on his own. Richard looked down. Then he asked the question that changed Nathan's life. "Why didn't you tell me you knew all this?" Nathan paused. He said that people usually don't listen to janitors. The word struck the billionaire harder than any accusation could have. Richard looked back at the boardroom. Then he asked Nathan to come inside. Nathan walked into the room where his report had been thrown into the trash that morning. This time, nobody looked at him like a janitor. The forensic investigators confirmed that Nathan's findings were accurate. More than $11 million had been diverted through fraudulent contracts over several years. Martin Cole and 2 other executives had secretly controlled the shell companies receiving the money. But Nathan had found something even more important. One of the fraudulent payments had been scheduled to clear that very afternoon. If Nathan had not noticed the pattern, the company would have lost millions more. The board sat in complete silence. Richard slowly looked at the crumpled report that someone had recovered from the trash. He carefully unfolded it. The pages were wrinkled and torn. He stared at Nathan. Then, in front of everyone, the billionaire apologized. Not as a CEO. Not as a billionaire. As a man who had made a terrible mistake. Nathan didn't celebrate. He didn't demand money. He simply asked Richard to make sure people were judged by what they could contribute, not by the uniforms they wore. That sentence changed more than Nathan's career. Richard established an internal employee reporting system where every worker, from executives to maintenance staff, could submit concerns directly to an independent review committee. Nathan was offered a position in the company's internal audit department. He accepted, but only after making sure the janitorial staff would receive better wages and stronger benefits. 6 months later, Nathan was no longer cleaning executive offices. He was working as a financial compliance analyst. He kept the old janitor uniform hanging inside his office. When Grace visited him for the first time, she looked around at the glass walls and expensive furniture. Nathan smiled and told her that none of it mattered as much as the little kitchen table where he had stayed up late studying after she went to sleep. Grace hugged her father. She told him she had always known he could do something amazing. Nathan smiled through tears. He knew the truth. He hadn't become valuable when he received a new job title. He had always been valuable. The world had simply taken too long to notice. Years later, Nathan would still remember the sound of that crumpled report hitting the bottom of the trash can. It had felt like rejection, like humiliation, like the end of something. But sometimes the thing that looks like the end is simply the moment before your life changes direction. Nathan didn't need revenge. He needed someone to finally listen. And when that moment came, he proved something that money could never buy. Dignity does not come from a title, a suit, or a bank account. It comes from character, courage, and the willingness to do what is right even when nobody is watching. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories about kindness, courage, second chances, and people who refuse to give up. And before you leave, I want you to answer one question in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated because of your job, your appearance, or your circumstances? Remember Nathan's story. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is carrying the very answer everyone else needs. And sometimes the report thrown into the trash is the one that could save everything.